The Invisible Woman. Sophia Reynolds had mastered the art of disappearing in plain sight. For 6 years she had walked through the chrome and glass doors of Titan Industries wearing the same protective uniform: beige cardigans over cream blouses, khaki slacks that hung loosely on her frame, and sensible flats that made no sound on the marble floors. Her honey-blonde hair stayed pulled back in a severe ponytail, and her face bore only the faintest trace of foundation and clear lip gloss. This was her shield, her way of surviving in a world where she spent every day dangerously close to the one man who could shatter her carefully constructed walls. Marcus Drake was everything Sophia had promised herself she would never want. Brilliant, driven, and impossibly wealthy, he had built Titan Industries from nothing more than a college dorm room idea into a global technology empire worth $30 billion. At 38, he had the kind of presence that commanded attention the moment he entered a room. Dark hair peppered with distinguished silver at the temples, intense gray eyes that seemed to analyze everything, and a jawline that belonged on magazine covers, which it often did. Sophia arrived each morning at 6:15, a full hour before Marcus. She brewed his preferred Sumatra blend coffee, reviewed his schedule on her tablet, and organized the stack of documents requiring his signature. By the time his private elevator chimed at 7:20, she had transformed his day from chaos into order. This was her gift, her value, and for 6 years it had been enough. "Morning, Sophia," Marcus said, accepting his coffee with that brief smile that made her heart skip. "I'm a lifesaver. I don't know how I survived before you started here." Their fingers brushed during the exchange, sending warmth racing up Sophia's arm. She stepped back quickly, clasping her tablet against her chest like armor. "Just doing my job, Mr. Drake." "Marcus," he corrected, as he did at least twice a week. "Don't you think we're past formalities?" Sophia nodded but said nothing. Using his first name felt too intimate, too dangerous. She watched him disappear into his corner office with its panoramic views of San Francisco Bay, then returned to her desk, willing her pulse to slow. The morning proceeded normally. Conference calls, document reviews, rescheduling meetings that ran long. It wasn't until after lunch that Marcus emerged with an expression Sophia couldn't quite read. "Do you have a moment?" he asked. She followed him inside, notepad ready. But instead of discussing business, Marcus gestured to the chair across from his desk. Sophia sat, confused by the departure from routine. "The Riverside Manor Gala next Friday, Sophia," Marcus began, leaning back in his leather chair. "I'd like you to attend." "Of course," Sophia replied automatically. "I'll coordinate with—" "No," Marcus interrupted gently. "I want you there as a guest, Sophia, not working. You've organized these events for years but never actually enjoyed one. That should change." Sophia felt something crack in her carefully maintained composure. "Mr. Drake, I appreciate the thought, but I'm really more comfortable behind the scenes." Marcus leaned forward, his gray eyes holding hers with an unexpected intensity. "Sophia, you work harder than anyone in this company. You deserve to be celebrated, not hidden. Besides," he added, a slight smile playing at his lips, "I could use someone genuinely interesting to talk to. The usual crowd can be rather tiresome." The compliment landed like a physical touch. Sophia felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'll think about it," she managed. "Please do," Marcus said softly. "You might surprise yourself." That evening, Sophia found herself at Isabella Torres's boutique in the Marina District, her best friend since their college days at Berkeley. Isabella had achieved her dream of becoming a fashion designer, creating custom pieces for San Francisco's elite. Her shop was an elegant sanctuary of silk and possibility. "You look like someone just told you the world is ending," Isabella observed, pouring them both wine. "What happened?" Sophia explained everything. The invitation, her confusion, her terror at the thought of Marcus seeing her anything other than his reliable assistant. Isabella set down her wineglass with a decisive clink. Sophia Marie Reynolds, I have watched you hide behind those terrible beige cardigans for 6 years. You're brilliant, you're beautiful, and you deserve to be seen. This man has finally given you permission to step into the light. You're going to take it. Isabella, I can't. Yes, you can, Isabella insisted, standing up with determination in her eyes, and I'm going to help you find a dress that makes his heart stop. The transformation. Isabella pulled dress after dress from her private collection. Sophia rejected the red ones as too bold, the pink ones as too sweet, the silver ones as too flashy. Then Isabella disappeared into the back room and emerged with a garment bag, her eyes gleaming with certainty. Try this one, she said simply. Inside was a midnight blue gown that shimmered like starlight. The fabric was silk charmeuse, cut to skim curves Sophia had spent years hiding. The neckline was elegant, sophisticated, revealing nothing inappropriate, yet suggesting everything. It was beautiful, feminine, and completely unlike anything Sophia had ever worn. I can't. Sophia started, but Isabella was already pushing her toward the fitting room. The silk felt cool against her skin as she slipped into the dress. When Sophia turned to face the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The woman looking back was confident, radiant, someone who belonged in Marcus Drake's world rather than just orbiting its edges. Isabella appeared in the doorway and pressed both hands to her chest. That's the one, absolutely the one. Friday arrived with terrifying speed. Sophia spent the afternoon at a salon letting professionals transform her hair into loose waves that cascaded over her shoulders. The makeup artist enhanced her features with subtle skill. Smoky eyes, defined cheekbones, lips painted a perfect rose. Standing in her apartment, studying her reflection one final time, Sophia almost lost her nerve. But then she thought about Marcus's face when he'd asked her to attend, the genuine hope in his eyes, and she grabbed her clutch before she could change her mind. For 6 years she had been invisible. Tonight, just for one night, she would let herself be seen. The Riverside Manor was ablaze with light when her car arrived. Photographers lined the entrance, capturing images of tech moguls and venture capitalists in their finest. Sophia took a deep breath and stepped out, immediately feeling dozens of eyes turned toward her. She walked up the stone steps with her head held high, channeling every ounce of courage she possessed. Inside, crystal chandeliers cast dancing light over designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. A jazz quartet played softly while waiters circulated with champagne. Sophia scanned the crowd for Marcus and found him near the bar, discussing something with his CFO, Richard Chen. As if sensing her presence, Marcus looked up. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and the effect was instantaneous. Marcus's conversation stopped mid-sentence. His champagne glass froze halfway to his lips. His entire expression transformed into something raw and unguarded, wonder mixed with disbelief. Sophia watched him excuse himself and begin moving toward her, weaving through the crowd without ever breaking eye contact. Each step he took made her heart beat faster. When he finally reached her, standing close enough that she could smell his cologne, sandalwood and something uniquely him, he seemed at a loss for words. "Sophia," he said finally, his voice rougher than she'd ever heard it, "you look absolutely breathtaking." "Thank you," she replied, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "You clean up rather well yourself." A smile tugged at his lips, but his eyes remained serious, intense. "I've worked with you for 6 years, and I thought I knew you. But seeing you tonight, I realized you've been hiding all along, haven't you?" Before Sophia could answer, a woman's voice cut through the moment. "Marcus, darling, there you are." They both turned to see a striking woman in a crimson gown approaching. Victoria Caldwell, Marcus's former business partner, and, Sophia had heard through office gossip, his ex-girlfriend. Her smile was beautiful and predatory all at once. "Victoria," Marcus said carefully, his body tensing beside Sophia. "I didn't know you'd be here." Victoria's gaze slid to Sophia, assessing and dismissive. "Is this your assistant? How quaint. Does she always attend events with you now?" "This is Sophia Reynolds," Marcus said, his voice cooling several degrees. "And she's here tonight as my guest because I wanted to spend time with someone whose company I actually enjoy." Victoria's smile tightened. "How modern of you, Marcus. I'm sure the board will find your relationship with your subordinate absolutely fascinating." The threat hung in the air, sharp and dangerous, but Marcus didn't flinch. Instead, he took Sophia's hand, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that sent electricity through her entire body. "Excuse us, Victoria," he said firmly, then led Sophia through the crowd toward the terrace. Outside, the San Francisco night air was cool and refreshing.
"Who is she to you?" Sophia asked, though part of her didn't want to know the answer. Marcus sighed, running a hand through his hair. "We were business partners when I first started Titan. We also dated for about a year. It ended badly when she tried to force a buyout of my shares. I discovered she'd been working with competitors, sharing proprietary information. I had to cut all ties, business and personal." "She seems to think she still has some claim on you," Sophia observed. "She thinks a lot of things that aren't true," Marcus replied. He turned to face her fully, his gray eyes intense in the moonlight. "Sophia, I need to tell you something. I've been trying to find the right moment for months, but there never seems to be a perfect time." Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. "What is it?" "I'm attracted to you," Marcus said, the words tumbling out as if he'd been holding them back too long. "I have been for years, but you're my assistant, and I never wanted to make you uncomfortable or put you in a position where you felt pressured. So I kept my distance, kept things professional. But tonight, seeing you like this, seeing the real you finally stepping out of those shadows you've been hiding in, I can't pretend anymore. I don't want to be your boss. I want to be the man who makes you smile, who earns the right to hold your hand, who gets to know all the parts of yourself you've been keeping hidden." Sophia's breath caught. "Marcus, you don't have to say anything right now. I just needed you to know. Whatever you decide, your job is safe. Nothing changes unless you want it to." For 6 years, Sophia had imagined this moment, but in her fantasies, she'd always been brave, confident, ready. Now, faced with the reality of Marcus's confession, she felt paralyzed by fear and hope in equal measure. Then she remembered why she'd worn this dress, why she'd let Isabella transform her appearance. She was tired of being invisible. "I've had feelings for you since my 2nd month at Titan. I've spent 6 years hiding them because I was terrified of losing you, even just as my boss. But tonight, when I put on this dress, I decided I was tired of being afraid." Marcus's eyes widened, hope and disbelief warring in his expression. "You mean—" Instead of answering, Sophia closed the distance between them and kissed him. The complications. The kiss was everything Sophia had imagined and nothing like she'd expected. His lips were warm and sure, his hands gentle as they cupped her face. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, he rested his forehead against hers. "That was worth 6 years of waiting," he murmured. They stayed on the terrace for another hour, talking about everything they'd never been able to say before. Marcus confessed he'd nearly asked her out a dozen times. Sophia admitted she'd memorized the way he took his coffee, not because she was efficient, but because she'd loved having that small connection to him. But Monday morning brought reality crashing back in. Photos from the gala had appeared in 3 different tech blogs, all showing Marcus and Sophia on the terrace, clearly intimate. By 9 o'clock, Sophia's desk phone was ringing with calls from curious colleagues. By 10, she'd been summoned to an emergency board meeting. She sat in the conference room surrounded by Titan's board members, feeling exposed in her usual beige cardigan.
The chairman, Robert Hayes, looked at Sophia with barely concealed disapproval. "Miss Reynolds, we need to discuss your relationship with Mr. Drake. As I'm sure you're aware, fraternization between executives and their direct reports creates significant liability for the company." "I understand your concern," Sophia replied, keeping her voice steady. "However, my relationship with Marcus, Mr. Drake, began outside of work hours and has not affected my performance or judgment." "That's not for you to determine," another board member interjected. "The optics alone are problematic. It appears you may have received preferential treatment." Marcus, who had been sitting silently at the head of the table, finally spoke. "If we're discussing preferential treatment, let's examine the facts. Sophia has increased my productivity by 40%, streamlined our entire executive operations department, and saved the company approximately $12 million through her vendor negotiations. Her performance reviews have been exemplary for 6 consecutive years. If anything, I've been underutilizing her talents by keeping her in an assistant role, which is why I'm recommending she be promoted to Vice President of Operations, effective immediately. She'll report directly to Richard Chen instead of me, eliminating any conflict of interest. Her compensation will be commensurate with her actual contributions to this company, not her previous title." The room fell silent. Sophia stared at Marcus, shocked. They hadn't discussed this. "That's highly irregular," Robert Hayes said slowly. "So is letting someone of Sophia's caliber remain undervalued for 6 years. I'm putting it to a vote. All in favor?" After a tense moment, Richard Chen raised his hand, then another board member, and another. By the time the votes were counted, Sophia's promotion had passed by a narrow margin. As the meeting adjourned, Victoria Caldwell, who had somehow secured a seat on the board during a recent shakeup, approached her with a cold smile. "Congratulations on your promotion. I'm sure it had nothing to do with sleeping with the CEO." "Actually," Sophia replied, meeting her gaze steadily, "it has everything to do with 6 years of exceptional work that you would have noticed if you spent more time focusing on business and less time creating drama." That evening, Sophia and Marcus met at his penthouse apartment overlooking the bay. She had been there before for work, but this time felt different. This time, she was there as his equal, his partner. "You didn't have to do that. The promotion. I don't want people thinking—" "Let them think whatever they want," Marcus interrupted, pulling her into his arms. "You earned that position 10 times over. I should have promoted you years ago, but I was too worried about how it would look, about complicating our working relationship. I won't make that mistake again." He kissed her gently, then more deeply, and Sophia felt herself melting into his embrace. For the first time in 6 years, she wasn't hiding anything. The new beginning. 6 months later, Sophia stood in her corner office at Titan Industries, reviewing quarterly reports. Through her windows, she could see Marcus's office down the hall, close enough to feel connected, far enough to maintain professional boundaries. The transition to VP of Operations had been challenging. She'd faced skepticism from colleagues who assumed she'd slept her way to the top, weathered passive-aggressive comments from Victoria at every board meeting, and worked twice as hard as necessary to prove herself. But she'd also closed the largest partnership deal in Titan's history, restructured their entire supply chain, and earned grudging respect from even her harshest critics. Her relationship with Marcus had deepened into something real and lasting. They'd learned to separate work from personal life, to support each other without crossing professional lines, to be partners in every sense of the word. He'd met her family at Thanksgiving. She'd accompanied him to his mother's birthday dinner. They'd taken a weekend trip to Napa where they'd talked about the future in terms of we instead of I. Tonight was the annual Titan Industries Gala, and for the first time, Sophia felt no anxiety about attending. She'd chosen her own dress, a sophisticated emerald green that made her eyes shine. No more hiding, no more pretending to be invisible. Marcus picked her up at 7, looking devastating in his tuxedo. But it was the way he looked at her, with pride and love and unguarded affection, that made her feel truly beautiful.
Ready? He asked, offering his arm. Absolutely, Sophia replied. The gala was held at the Riverside Manor, where everything had changed 6 months ago. As they walked in together, Sophia noticed the difference in how people reacted. There were no shocked stares this time, only respectful nods and genuine smiles. She'd earned her place here through her work, her competence, her undeniable value to the company. Midway through the evening, Marcus led her outside to the terrace where they'd first kissed. The San Francisco night was clear, stars visible despite the city lights. I wanted to bring you back here because this is where my life changed, where I finally stopped being afraid and told you the truth. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Sophia's breath caught as he dropped to one knee. Sophia Reynolds, you've challenged me, inspired me, and shown me what it means to truly partner with someone who matches my ambition and exceeds my expectations. You stepped out of the shadows and changed everything, not just for me, but for everyone who gets to work with the real you. You're brilliant, brave, and the best decision I never knew I was making when I hired you 6 years ago. He opened the box to reveal a stunning sapphire ring surrounded by diamonds, the deep blue reminiscent of the dress she'd worn that first night. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life being worthy of the woman who was brave enough to emerge from hiding and show me who she really was? Tears streamed down Sophia's face as she nodded. Yes,